The Secret Science at Work by Max Freedom Long. Chapter 9. Contacting the High Self and Presenting the Prayer. Some of the HRAs still wished to bypass the low self in prayer, still wanted to believe that their conscious reasoning middle selves could contact their high selves directly, if only we knew the way. When we began the work of translating passages from the Bible back into the sacred language, it was the chief interest of these people that I find explicit directions for this way. One of them wrote as follows: I am sure the key lies in the words, "Ask and it shall be given you, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you." Do translate these passages back into Hawaiian, back into Hawaiian, and see if there's something there that will tell you how to go about contacting the high self directly. The passage was investigated at once. Ask means only ask in Hawaiian, no key there. But with seek and knock, it was different. In Huna, seek is imi, I-mi. The roots give us the meaning of begetting, or planting, the seed picture, and of pouring out of water, the symbol of mana. In other words, when one has made his picture of the desired conditions, which must be sent on a flow of mana over the aka cord, it is then time to seek out and to find the symbolic kingdom of heaven, or the high self, where the seed is to be planted and watched over by the Lord in quotes, of that realm. Knock is kikiki, K-I-K-E-K-E, which has the secret meaning of to divide. And this is the symbol of dividing the surcharge of mana by sending part of it across the aka cord to the high self. The door, which is to be opened when one knocks, by sending the mana flow as one seeks, by making the seeds or thought forms of the prayer and setting them floating on the mana flow, is called puka in Hawaiian. This word, P-U-K-A, this word means to change something from one condition to another, which tells us in Huna terms that the door is open to the high self, who alone can change conditions to answer a prayer. I translated many other passages in the Bible concerning prayer. Jesus discussed very openly the matter of the need for prayer, but described the secret Huna elements and methods in words which only a student kahuna could understand in their inner meanings. The 6th chapter of Matthew is a source of much information concerning the Huna type prayer, provided, of course, one knows enough of the secret meanings in advance to understand what is set forth. Verse 1, quote, "Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise, you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven." Let me read that again. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men. Seems like there's a word missing here, but I don't know. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise, you have no reward of your Father, which is in heaven. The key here is in the word alms, A-L-M-S, which in Hawaiian is made up of the roots mana, wa, lia, M-A-N-A-W-A-L-E-A. This tells us what is given as alms is mana, and that it is presented to the high self, while we are using our mind, wa, W-A, in thinking, reflecting, and reasoning, and that when we have presented the gift of mana, while thinking carefully to send the thought forms of the prayer, there comes pleasure, Leah, L-E-A. The alms are not to be given openly to or before men, because they are gifts of mana given inwardly along the Aka cord to the Father, capital F. The warning is appended, otherwise ye have no reward of your Father. Verse 2 is not pertinent to Huna, and verse 3 only repeats the assertion that prayer is a giving of mana, and therefore an inward action, not outward. Verse 4, quote, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father, which seeth in secret himself, shall reward thee openly. End quote. Another word for secret in Hawaiian is nalo, N-A-L-O, and its meaning is hidden or concealed or invisible. It also has the meaning of the high self when it disappears in the distance and cannot be seen. Again, we have the fact that the action is inward, and that the high self may be at a distance and never seen, but that it may be contacted through the Aka cord by sending the mana and thought forms telepathically. Verse 5 and verse 6 repeat the instructions to pray inwardly. Verse 7 warns against the mistaken belief that the high self actually hears the words no matter how loudly they are spoken. Verse 8 adds a little more of the Huna secret in, for your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before you ask him. In Hawaiian, the word need is pono, P-O-N-O, which has the meaning also of having reformed, having made amends for hurts done others, having done the needful things before, being justified and rendered ready to make the prayer. This meaning puts an entirely different light on the difficulty mentioned earlier as one tripping up those HRAs who asked why one must make a definite picture of what is desired to come to pass in answer to the prayer. They had argued that if all our needs were known before we pray, then why pray? But if it had not been necessary to pray, Jesus would not have told why and how prayer was to be performed, or who would answer the prayers, and under what conditions. The high self, without doubt, knows even better than the lower selves what the whole man needs, but does not override free will to interfere and give it instead of letting the lessons of experience be learned in the efforts to get needed things. Our needs are known, but Huna tells us the further secret that unless we come to prayer only after having made amends and setting our house in order, our prayer will be of no use. Pono is a very useful word in Huna. It has still another meaning of importance. It means to have everything properly done to put in correct form and order. This applies to the making of the thought form pictures especially. They must be right. They must be for the good of all concerned. They must be of things possible to attain. Otherwise, they are not pono. In the verses which follow, known as the Lord's Prayer, one has to pause to see what visual or mental pictures are required to turn the words of each phrase into a thought form picture, which could be sent telepathically to the high self and to be used as a seed or mold in creating the answer to the prayer. It becomes immediately apparent that no such thought form picture is intended in the opening line. It is simply a directive to show that the prayer should be addressed to the high self, who is looking upon with reverence by the lower selves. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven, gives us through the outer root meaning of the sentence translated into Hawaiian. High Self, allow me to make contact with you and to give you mana to be used to make the thought form picture I give become a reality on the earth plane, just as the picture is now a reality on the level of thought pattern seed molds where you are. The key words are kingdom, or aupuni, A-U-Puni, with its root meanings, then come, C-O-M-E, or ihiki mai, E-H-I-K-I-M-A-I, with 7 different additional general Huna meanings, and many more of significance hidden in the roots. Will be done is in Hawaiian, keyed in the words malamaiia, M-A-L-A-M-A-I-A, and maki, M-A-K-E, from the roots of which one finds that the will, W-I-L-L, is desire, and that such a desire creates symbolically by causing something to swell, enlarge, or grow, which gives us again the seed, or the thought form picture of the prayer. Verse 11, give us this day our daily bread, hinges on the play of words met in the Old Testament, in which manna fell from the heaven to nourish the Israelites, again a symbol rather than a historical fact. It was the manna, the vital force, the bread of life, or the water of life. There were a number of symbols for the 3 manas of the kahunas. In this case, the manna was the same as that which fell from heaven in the biblical accounts. The manna sent to the high self is of the low self, earthly, but when it is returned by the high self, it becomes rain, R-A-I-N, or mana, a blessed nourishment. It is also the help and guidance and protection which can be offered only by the high self, and then only if it is allowed to have its full part in the life of man. The low mana must be given to the high self with daily prayers if work is to be done by it on the physical plane. Verse 12, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, does not refer to the sins or hurt for which one must make amends and be set free inwardly before the prayer can begin. This refers to a different kind of sin, one of missing the mark or of failing to make complete contact with the high self and get the prayer correctly made because of another grade of sin, the fixed or complex tangles of unrationalized memory clusters lodged in the Aka body of the low self. We shall be helped to get cleared of these, or forgiven if we help others to get free. This is a matter which will be taken up at a later time. Just now we're dealing with the normal condition in which the path is not blocked badly by complexes. In brackets, in verse 14, the same important idea is stressed. Verse 13, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Becomes, do not cause the Aka cord to be loosened. In brackets, symbol of inability of the low self to make contact with the high self. Close bracket. Or let us be caught in a snare of threads, symbol of the complex. For we know that you are kind and perfect and beautiful and will always be so. Amen covers the definite ending of the work of sending a prayer. It will be noted after a study of the Huna meanings hidden in the Lord's Prayer, we find that this is really not at all a form of prayer to be used as such in the Huna sense. It is a Huna formula listing the elements involved in prayer making and the steps which have to be taken. It contains almost nothing that corresponds to the thought form picture seed or cup of the actual prayer. These things are left to the individuals to set about providing for himself according to his own needs. So we did not find the shortcut to contact with the high self for which we had searched, but we did find startling confirmation of the Huna method of approach to prayer. We were more than content to go on making our careful thought form picture, getting George to understand and cooperate, accumulate the surcharge of mana, and send the prayer along the aka cord to the high self. Is there any way of knowing, lacking the intuitional knowing, when we have made successful contact with the high self? Here are some physical sensations reported by the HRAs. Number 1, a tingling sensation in all or part of the body. Some feel this as if it were raining a fine tingling electrical downpour from the high self. Some feel it as a tingling in the hands or along the spine or in the genitals, or even through all the body down to the toes. This sensation may last a second or for a full minute or more. It usually leaves a fine sensation of well-being. Number 2, a sudden great upsurging of mixed emotions of joy and love and worship. It is an emotion one cannot arouse at will, but which comes from the low self as the evidence of its joyous reaction when able to contact the high self. The Kahunas believed that only the low self can create emotions, be they hate, fear, or anger, love, or desire, but that once the emotion is created, it can be given to the middle self to share. Number 3, the last of these 3 sensations experienced by the HRAs upon making contact with the high self is a strange little feeling that comes in the solar plexus, from whence the aka cord probably goes up or out to the high self. The same spot or part of the body, we are told by the Kahunas, is the center of the low self, mental, memory, mana activities. The same type of sensation is felt in protruding a finger of aka substance to contact something close at hand, or to send a flow of mana across a aka thread or cord already connected with one's low self to the low self of another one. Excuse me. Once one has learned to recognize this feeling, it will serve as a signal that the contact with the high self is complete, as the blocked or unblocked condition of the aka cord will allow at the time. In addition to this sensation, there is frequently one of having cobweb strands laid over the face or neck or hands. What may be called the transcendent experience of contact with the high self comes usually but once or twice in a lifetime. Suddenly, the unseen doorway is silently entered by the low self, and contact is made. The mana is presented by the low self, and the whole person is flooded with joy. He may see the white light that forms as the high self accepts the flow of mana and converts it into a vibration of light. He has an experience which will remain as a sacred memory and a conviction of verity for the rest of his days. Usually, when this blessed reuniting takes place, as the long absent prodigal son comes home, to the Father in his house. All thought of asking for something is forgotten. It is enough for the moment to be at home again and to feel the joy of contact. But the comings and goings of the reformed prodigal son become natural and regular. No longer is the fatted calf killed, and no longer are new garments brought to be laid on ragged shoulders. However, if none of these sensations is felt for a time, one keeps trying for contact, always with a preliminary surcharging of mana. One holds ready the picture of the desired condition. But first, there is a ritual before we present the prayer. The middle self does its part by meditating on and affirming love for the high self, which the low self builds into powerful emotion. The middle self directs the drive towards the high self until the contact is made. The gift of mana is then made to the high self for its own high purposes of service and world betterment. After that, the command is held over the low self to send on the continuing mana flow of the picture we have so carefully built of what we wish to have brought to pass for us. To make a precise and clear picture, the Kahunas often composed a short prayer describing what was wanted in exact but brief detail. They repeated it 3 times in succession to make very sure that the picture remained the same and stood out clear and strong. They spoke aloud as if addressing the high self, knowing that the low self was carrying the picture along the aka cord to the high self. One well-made prayer may be sufficient, provided one making the prayer is experienced and gifted with unusual skill. For most of us, the whole prayer action needs to be repeated daily until the answer is given. If the need is very urgent, one may pray without ceasing, or as often as one can be rested and accumulate fresh mana. There seems to be no limit to the ability of the high self to bring about changes in conditions. Everything seems to depend on the amount of mana made available to the high self, provided, of course, that the picture is well made. 2 people who are completely agreed on what the picture is to be may work together, pooling their mana and asking their high selves to work together to bring about the healing or changing of any condition or circumstance. When one of the pair is ill and weak and lacking in mana, the one in good health can help greatly by supplying the needed mana to go with the prayer. But not all our prayers concern improvement in health or conditions. Many of them are for guidance in a decision to be made or a course of action to be undertaken. We need ideas as an answer, not physical things that will be materialized. How are the answers to be communicated from the high self to us? In The Secret Science Behind Miracles, I told of how one man I knew well, the elevator builder, described his sensations on contacting his high self and also on how he received his guidance. He said that on contact, he felt or heard a sharp tingling, as if an electric bell had buzzed inside him. 3 times each day he paused to reach out mentally for contact with the high self, which he had learned was there, even though he did not know just what it was. And always there was the signal when contact was made. He relaxed mentally when it came and waited. If there was some danger to him or his men who were working under him, he would get a warning hunch and would be on guard. He might sense the danger as a large or small, or close or distant in the matter of time. As the event drew near, he would repeat his contact more and more frequently, often giving a mental picture of where to go to await the danger, and by being on guard, prevent injury or accident to his workmen, to himself, or to the structure. Neither from the Kahunas nor from the work of the HRA have we been able to decide what form of communication is used by the high self to give messages or guidance to the lower selves. Communications seem to come by way of the Aka cord and the low self when sent by the high self, but the low self has a strong tendency to deliver the message in terms of symbols or in the form of pictures with accompanying sound or other sensory impressions. These symbolic messages are very definite and often come in a vivid dream, but the individual must learn to know and watch for dream messages of this type and from this source. The high self, as named in the word Akuahaimio, Akuahaimio, or the God who speaks silently, is indicated as one able to give an auditory impression of spoken words through the low self. This still small voice is the ideal communication if one can get it, but few can, and these few are seldom able to be entirely sure that it is the high self speaking and not the imagination, or what they heard said is not colored or changed by the low self as it delivers the message. Perhaps the most common communication from the high self comes in what Kahunas called the rising of a thought in the mind. Experience tends to strengthen the belief that the high self can cause thoughts to arise in our minds, perhaps by passing along seed ideas through the low self, so that we feel we have thoughts of things ourselves, but actually are getting ideas sent to us to give the needed guidance. This has been called inspiration when used in great art or achievements, which seem to transcend the human possibilities. Or you will hear your friends say, "I had a hunch," or perhaps, "I was impressed to do this or that." After an earnest prayer to the high self, when a thought rises in the mind with clarity and compulsion, anent the subject of prayer, it should be accepted as an answer and acted upon. And that concludes Chapter 9. Chapter 10 is entitled Summary of the Huna Prayer Method.